Amidst rehearsed smiles and cameras at the ready, a child dares to dream of a place she was never invited. She crosses the line from fantasy with the courage of someone who just wants to be seen. And what happens next changes everything before a hushed crowd. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Now, on with the story. The Grand Plaza Mall in New York City was at its most exuberant that December, with every corridor transformed into a gallery of illuminated dreams. The storefronts competed to see which one shone brightest, which one promised the most happiness wrapped in gift paper. But the real spectacle was on the second floor, where a children's clothing brand had set up a Christmas scene that looked like it was ripped straight from a Hollywood movie. Artificial snow falling in perfect flakes, a red and gold sleigh surrounded by decorated pine trees, soft music filling the air with promises of magic, and at the center of it all, a Santa Claus with an impeccable beard, surrounded by children dressed like little princes and princesses. The campaign had a grand name, something like a holiday dreamscape, and had been planned down to the smallest detail by a marketing team that charged a fortune for every second of manufactured emotion. Everything there was calculated to generate maximum engagement on social media so that mothers and fathers would share photos of their children in that perfect setting, associating the brand with the purity of childhood and the generosity of Christmas. It was $1 million operation disguised as kindness, and it was working exactly as planned. No one knew it, but the true commander of the entire operation was there just a few feet away, observing everything without being noticed. Robert Harrison Pierce was not the kind of man who appeared in ad campaigns. At 43, he preferred the background, the ice-cold air-conditioned rooms, where the fate of entire companies was decided with a signature. The owner of a holding company that controlled dozens of brands, including the one sponsoring a holiday dreamscape, Robert had a reputation for being cold, methodical, and ruthless when necessary. His employees respected him more out of fear than admiration, and his competitors knew that facing him was always a calculated risk. That Saturday afternoon, he was dressed with intentional simplicity: dark jeans, a plain white shirt with no visible brand, and understated sneakers. He wanted to see the campaign in action without his presence altering the team's behavior. He wanted real data, genuine reactions, numbers that could be turned into performance reports. Robert didn't believe in Christmas magic, much less in free kindness. To him, everything was strategy, investment, return, and he was there to make sure his money was being well spent. Leaning against one of the mall's columns, he watched the professional photographer arrange the children in groups, adjusting poses, asking for wider smiles, correcting little hands that strayed from the perfect frame. The man was efficient, Robert had to admit. Every photo came out flawless, ready to be stamped on promotional materials and social media. The parents waited in line with anxious expressions, holding their phones as if they were about to witness something historic. Well-dressed, well-groomed, well-behaved children, everything according to the script. That's when he saw her for the first time. On the other side of the decorative railings that marked off the campaign space, a small girl was watching everything with an intensity that seemed disproportionate to her size. She must have been about 8 or 9, maybe younger, it was hard to tell. Her dark hair was tangled, pulled back into a ponytail that had seen better days. Her clothes were clean but worn, the kind of outfit that gets passed down until it has no official owner. She wore rubber sandals, inadequate for the mall's strong air conditioning, and her eyes, large and dark, didn't blink as they followed every movement within that illuminated scene. Robert noticed the girl by chance, in one of those automatic head turns you make when something deviates from the norm. She was so still, so focused, that she looked like a statue amidst the constant flow of people moving through the corridor. He was about to turn his attention back to the campaign when he noticed something in her eyes. It wasn't envy, it wasn't anger. It was something deeper and more painful. It was a pure desire to belong, to exist in that scene, to be one of those children whose parents recorded every smile as if it were the most precious thing in the world. And then, without understanding exactly why, Robert felt a familiar discomfort rise in his chest, an old feeling stored somewhere he avoided visiting. He shook his head, trying to focus on the numbers, the results, the reach metrics the campaign was generating. But his eyes kept returning to the girl. Inside the set, a young employee had also noticed the girl's presence. Camilla was 24 and worked as an event assistant, one of those temporary jobs that paid little and demanded a lot. She had been there since 7 in the morning, helping set up the scene, organizing the lines, handing out tickets, dealing with impatient parents and crying children. She was exhausted, her feet aching inside the tight shoes the coordinator had required all female employees to wear, but something in that little girl's expression struck a sensitive chord within her. Camilla knew that look. She had been a poor child too, raised by her grandmother in a project in the South Bronx, knowing from an early age that the world had places where she wasn't welcome. She had learned to make herself small, invisible, so as not to bother anyone, so as not to be kicked out of the beautiful places she sometimes ventured into, just to feel what it was like to be on the other side. And now, seeing that girl watching the Christmas campaign with that mix of fascination and pain, Camilla felt her heart ache. She was about to approach, to try to start a conversation, maybe offer a piece of chocolate she had saved in her pocket, when the campaign coordinator, Veronica, appeared at her side with a clipboard in hand and an expression that tolerated no deviation from protocol. Veronica was 38, with a career built on impeccable efficiency and zero tolerance for improvisation. For her, this campaign was a personal showcase, a chance to impress the holding company's executives and secure even more lucrative future contracts. Every detail had been planned, every photo had been pre-approved, every child had been selected through a rigorous casting call. There was no room for spontaneity, much less for ill-planned charity. But the girl, apparently, didn't know the rules. When the photographer announced he was going to do another round of photos because the light was perfect, the girl summoned her courage. Robert saw everything from where he stood. She took a deep breath, wiped her hands on her clothes as if preparing for something important, and began to walk slowly toward the set. Her steps were hesitant but determined. She slipped past the decorative railings, ignored the stares of a few parents who noticed her, and went straight to the bench where the other children were already positioned. She sat on the very edge, in the corner, taking up as little space as possible. She smoothed her hair with her hands, forced a smile that tried to imitate the other children's, and sat there, hoping no one would notice, hoping the photographer would just click the shutter and she could have that moment recorded, that proof that she too was part of the world. For a few seconds it seemed like it would work. The photographer was focused on adjusting his camera. Santa Claus was looking ahead with his professional smile. The other children were too distracted to care. Camilla saw it and wanted to believe. It would be allowed that no one would notice, that the girl would get her Christmas photo. But Veronica noticed, and the photographer noticed. His voice cut through the air like a cold blade. "Hey, who let this girl in here?" The sound of Christmas music continued, but it suddenly seemed ironic, almost cruel. Every head turned. The parents looked on with a mixture of surprise and discomfort. Some of the children on the bench began to instinctively move away, as if the girl's presence could somehow contaminate them. The girl tried to explain, her voice coming out shaky and low. "I just wanted to sit in the corner. I won't be in the way, I promise." But the photographer was already approaching, already pulling her off the bench with a firm hand on her arm, not with explicit violence, but with that kind of harshness that hurts more on the inside than on the outside. "This is a professional campaign, not a public park. You're dirtying the set." His voice was loud, performative, as if he needed everyone to hear and understand that he was just doing his job, protecting the standard, maintaining quality. Camilla took a step forward, her heart racing, wanting to intervene, but Veronica cut her off with a sharp look and a harsh whisper. "Stay in your place. This isn't your problem. We have a protocol for these situations." Santa Claus, a 60-year-old actor named Mario who had been doing this job for decades, was clearly uncomfortable. He looked at Veronica, seeking guidance, but she just gestured for him to keep smiling and not get involved. The girl was placed outside the decorative railings, right back where she had started, only now with tears beginning to form in her eyes and a shame burning on her face. She tried to hold back the tears, biting her lower lip hard because she knew that crying in public would only give more ammunition to those who were already laughing at her on the inside. And that's when the photographer, perhaps wanting to justify his action to the parents watching the scene with varied expressions, uttered the sentence that would be the spark for everything that came next. "Santa doesn't take pictures with just anyone, sweetie. You have to earn it, you know. This isn't for everybody." The sentence echoed, not just in the girl's ears, but in every corner of that space. Some parents lowered their eyes, ashamed. A child asked her mother why the girl had been removed, and the mother just mumbled something about rules and went back to looking at her phone. Santa Claus closed his eyes for a second, clearly regretting being there. Camilla felt tears welling up, but she swallowed hard and remained still, obedient, powerless. And Robert Harrison Pierce, the man who had built an entire empire on cold numbers and rational decisions, felt something inside him break, because he had heard that sentence before. Not in those exact words, but with the same venom, the same cruelty disguised as a social rule. He had heard it when he was a child, when he was still just Robert, without the compound surnames or holding companies to his name. He had heard it one Christmas long ago, when he and his mother tried to enter a church charity event and were stopped at the door because they weren't wearing the right clothes. He had heard it when a man in a suit, much like the one he was today, looked at him with contempt and said something about poor people knowing their place and respecting the hierarchy. Robert had buried that memory so deep he didn't even know it still existed. He had built success, money, power, all so he would never be that boy again. He had become the very type of person who had once humiliated him, and now he was watching the scene repeat itself, funded by him in his name with his money. He started walking. His legs moved before his mind could calculate the consequences. He crossed the corridor, past the distracted shoppers, and entered the campaign space without asking for permission. The coordinator, Veronica, was the first to notice, and when her eyes recognized his face, all the blood seemed to drain from it. She knew every photo of the holding company's executives. She had studied the company's organizational chart, like someone studying for a life or death exam. "Mr. Pierce," she whispered, and it was enough for the photographer and the other employees to understand that something very serious was about to happen. But Robert didn't look at any of them first. He went straight to where the girl was, outside the railings, still trying to hold back her tears, still trying to be invisible. He knelt down, to her level, without touching her, respecting the space of someone who had already been touched too aggressively that day. "What's your name?" His voice came out softer than he intended, more human than he had been in years. The girl looked at him with suspicion, as if any answer could be another trap. But something in his eyes, some old shadow of recognized pain, made her answer in a whisper. "Isabella." "Isabella," he repeated, and the name seemed to have weight, history, dignity. "Did you want to take a picture with Santa Claus?" She nodded, unable to form words, without completely breaking down. Robert took a deep breath, stood up, and turned to face the entire campaign team. Veronica was pale. The photographer had taken 2 steps back. Camilla watched everything with a racing heart, not yet understanding what was happening, but feeling that it was something big. And then Robert Harrison Pierce did something he had never done in his entire career. He put humanity above profit. "I want that photographer's full name and his contract on my desk in 1 hour. I want HR down here immediately. I want to understand what kind of protocol allows a child to be publicly humiliated in a campaign that I funded." "Mr. Pierce, we were just following the brief," Veronica tried to explain, her voice failing. "The casting was approved. The children were selected. We have quality standards." He cut her off with a coldness she knew well but now directed at her. "Then your quality standard is sick, and if you think humiliating a child is part of an acceptable protocol, you're in the wrong job." The silence that followed was so thick it felt solid. Some parents started filming with their phones. More employees drew closer, curious. The girl Isabella watched everything without quite understanding, still expecting to be kicked out again at any moment. But Robert wasn't finished. He asked for the production microphone, the one used for announcements and organizing the lines. Veronica handed it over with trembling hands. and in front of dozens of people who were now paying full attention, he made an announcement no one expected. This campaign was created to celebrate Christmas, but we just forgot what Christmas really means. No one here, no one in this mall, no one in this city has the right to decide who deserves a photo and who doesn't, who deserves a moment of happiness and who doesn't. If this campaign doesn't have room for all children, then it has no room for any children at all. Some timid applause started. A mother discreetly wiped her eyes. Camilla felt a surge of emotion. He then turned to Isabella and held out his hand. "Come on, you're going to be the first one in the next picture." And she, still not quite believing it, took his hand and let herself be led back to the set, back to the bench, back to the place from which she had been so cruelly torn. Only this time she would be placed right in the center, right next to Santa Claus. And the whole world was going to see. Isabella sat on the bench, right next to Santa Claus, and the man behind the costume, Mario, made a point of placing a hand on her shoulder with a kindness that was genuine, not scripted. He had 3 granddaughters her age and knew how to recognize the look of someone who has been hurt and is trying to believe that something good can still happen. Other children were invited to join. The photo, and this time, unlike the previous selection, there was no casting call, no judgment. They were simply children, some well-dressed, others not so much, all sharing a moment that had started as advertising and had transformed into something no one had planned. Robert stepped back, watching the photographer, who was now clearly nervous, adjusting the camera with less steady hands than before. He knew he was being filmed by dozens of cell phones, knew that this moment would go viral before the afternoon was over, knew that the holding company's PR department would be in a panic. But, for the first time in many years, Robert didn't care about strategic planning. For the first time, he was acting on pure human impulse, and it was both terrifying and liberating. When the flash went off, capturing Isabella smiling for real for the first time that afternoon, something in the air changed. The parents who had looked on with contempt minutes before now seemed uncomfortable with their own initial reactions. Some mothers discreetly wiped their eyes. A father murmured to his wife something about raising their children with more empathy. And Camilla, the event assistant who had wanted to help, but hadn't had the courage, finally let her tears fall, because sometimes witnessing kindness hurts just as much as witnessing cruelty. Robert asked Camilla to join the photo too, and she refused several times, but he insisted with a firmness that allowed no refusal. "You tried to do the right thing, that deserves to be recognized." And so Camilla, in her wrinkled uniform and with red eyes, stood next to Isabella, and the two looked at each other with a silent understanding of those who know what it's like to be invisible. When the photo session ended, and people began to disperse, some still filming, others commenting in low voices, Robert realized he had created a situation that went far beyond a single good deed. Isabella was still there, holding Camilla's hand, looking at him with an expression that mixed gratitude and fear, as if expecting him to say at any moment that it had all been a cruel prank. Veronica approached, her clipboard now serving as a shield against her own insecurity. "Mr. Pierce, we need to discuss the next steps, how we're going to manage this on social media, the brand's positioning." He cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Later, right now I need to talk to this girl's mother." Isabella reacted immediately, her whole body tensing. "My mum's at work. She can't come here." Robert knelt again, looking directly at her. "I'm not going to cause any trouble for your mom, Isabella. I just want to make sure you're okay, that you have a place to go back to, that you're safe." The girl hesitated, then nodded slowly. "She cleans offices. She won't get off until late. We live nearby, in a building on the street behind the mall." "Okay," Robert said, and then something in him, some part he thought had died long ago, made a decision without consulting spreadsheets or analysts. "Do you want to get something to eat? There's a food court here. We can wait for your mum to get off work." Isabella looked at Camilla, seeking approval, and the young employee nodded with a tired but genuine smile. They went together, the three of them, forming an unlikely trio: the millionaire disguised as an ordinary person, the event assistant who had an endless shift ahead but didn't want to miss this moment, and the girl who an hour Hugo had been treated like trash and was now walking alongside people who treated her like a person. As they sat at a table in the food court, with Isabella devouring a hamburger as if she hadn't eaten properly in days, Robert began to realize the scale of what he had done. His phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages from the PR department, the marketing director, the board of directors. He glanced at the screen and saw that the video of his intervention was already circulating with dramatic captions. Millionaire humiliates photographer who kicked poor child out of Christmas campaign. The Kai. Views were climbing with every passing second. But there was another kind of message too, from a number he hadn't saved but recognized. Beatrice, his ex-wife, the woman he had been married to for 8 years and who had left him precisely because he had become, in her words, a heartless man who only knew how to convert emotion into profit. She had sent a video of the scene at the mall with just one sentence. So there's still a Robert under all that armor. He locked his phone screen and turned his attention back to Isabella, who was now drinking a soda and looking around the food court as if she were in a magical place. Camilla, sitting next to her, was explaining how the rides in the kids' play area on the upper level worked, and Isabella listened with such intense focus that Robert felt his chest tighten again. "Tell me something, Isabella," he said when she finished eating. "Why did you want to be in that photo so badly?" The girl wiped her mouth with a napkin and was silent for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. "Because I've never had a Christmas picture. Mom's phone isn't good. We don't have a camera. And I saw everyone taking pictures there, everyone happy, everyone making a memory, and I thought if I could get in one picture, even in the corner, it would be proof that I exist too, you know? That I'm a kid too, that I can have a Christmas too." Robert felt something break inside him. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. Because he knew exactly what that hunger to prove you exist was, to have physical evidence that you matter, that you're not just a shadow people ignore on the street. Camilla was discreetly wiping her eyes, and Robert realized that she understood too, that she also had her own stories of invisibility. Just then, a woman approached their table, shyly, holding her phone as if it were a dangerous weapon. "Excuse me, sir," she began, her voice trembling. "I saw what happened down there. I was in line with my daughter and I didn't do anything when that man took the girl out of the photo. I feel so bad about it. I just wanted to say that you did the right thing." Robert didn't know what to say, so he just thanked her with a nod. But the woman continued. "I posted the video on my social media. My daughter has a lot of followers. I think this will help spread the message." When she walked away, Camilla looked at Robert with a worried expression. "You realize this is going to get huge, right? That everyone is going to want to know who you are, who Isabella is, how the story continues." Robert nodded slowly. He knew the mechanics of viral content, knew how a good story was consumed by the public, with a veracity that could either elevate or destroy. And suddenly he understood the real danger. Isabella was about to become public. Her life, her story, her vulnerability, it would all be exposed. "Isabella," he said, taking her small hand in his, "do you understand that a lot of people are going to know about what happened today? That they'll want to interview you, take your picture, know about your life?" The girl frowned, confused. "Why? I just got in a picture." "Because you touched on something that bothers a lot of people," Camilla explained carefully. "You showed that sometimes people are mean without even realizing it. That sometimes we exclude others and think it's okay. And now a bunch of people are going to want to show that they're not like that they care, that they're different." Robert added, "And that can be good, but it can also be very hard. People will want to turn you into a symbol, a story of overcoming adversity, and sometimes they'll forget that you're just a girl who wanted a Christmas picture." Isabella processed this in silence, and then asked something neither of them expected. "And you? Why did you help me? You own everything here, right? Everyone got scared when they saw you. Why did you care?" The question was simple, direct, honest, and Robert had no rehearsed answer, no PR speech, no strategy. So he told the truth, something he hadn't said in years. "Because when I was little, about your age, Someone also took me out of a place where I wanted to be, and it hurt in a way I never forgot. And when I saw you being taken out of that photo, it was like I was seeing myself." Isabella studied his face for a long moment and then said something Robert would carry for the rest of his life. "But you got rich. You got powerful. How did you let yourself become like the people who hurt you?" The question was like a punch to the gut. Camilla held her breath, and Robert, for the first time in decades, had no answer. Because the girl was right. Somewhere between the humiliated child he had been and the ruthless businessman he had become, Robert had crossed a line and become the very type of person who had once made him suffer. He was about to try to answer when Camilla's phone rang. It was Veronica, the campaign coordinator, demanding that she return to work immediately. The young woman looked at Robert, torn, but he nodded for her to take the call. "I have to go," Camilla said, clearly frustrated. "But can I leave my number with you? I want to know if Isabella is okay." Robert took down the number, and as Camilla stood to leave, Isabella hugged her with a strength that seemed disproportionate for her small body. "Thanks for wanting to help me back there," the girl whispered, and Camilla felt the tears return. When they were alone, Robert and Isabella looked at each other across the table littered with empty wrappers. The mall continued its frantic pace around them, but there, at that table, it was as if a bubble of silence existed, where difficult questions needed to be answered. "I don't know if I can change who I've become," Robert finally said, "but I know I don't want you to go through what I went through and become what I've become. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet, but I'm going to try to protect you from what's coming." Isabella tilted her head, curious. "From what's coming? From people wanting to use you to look good, from people wanting to take pictures with you to get likes, from companies wanting to turn you into an advertisement, from the same system that threw you out coming back to get you just because now you get views." The girl thought for a moment and then asked, "And you? Do you want to use me too?" Her frankness was brutal and necessary. Robert took a deep breath. "I don't know, Isabella. I hope not. But I've been taught my whole life that everything is a transaction, that everything has a purpose. That kindness is an investment, so I don't know if I can help you without expecting something in return. And that scares me." Isabella nodded slowly, as if she were dealing with an honest adult for the first time in her life. "At least you're telling the truth. Most adults lie to kids thinking we don't notice." They sat there for another 2 hours, talking about things both small and large. Isabella told him about her mother, Lucia, who worked 3 different jobs and still barely managed to pay the rent on the single room they shared in a high, renovated tenement building. She told him about the public school she attended when she didn't have to miss it to help her mom. She told him about her dream of having her own bed, not having to share with her mother, of having a place where she could keep her drawings without them getting crumpled. Robert listened and realized how out of touch he had become with the reality of most people. He lived in a 4,300-square-foot apartment on the Upper East Side, had 3 cars, traveled abroad every month. And here was a 9-year-old girl whose biggest dream was to have her own bed. When Robert's phone rang for the 20th time, he finally answered. It was Michael, his right-hand man at the holding company, director of operations and a long-time friend. His voice was tense. "Robert, you need to get back to the office. The situation is getting out of control. 3 TV networks want an exclusive interview. The board is meeting, wanting to know what the hell you did. Beatrice called here saying she needs to talk to you. And there's a guy, an image consultant, Gabriel Foster, who's already offering to do crisis management for the campaign. He wants to turn this into a long-term corporate social responsibility initiative." Robert closed his eyes, feeling the corporate machine already moving to turn a human moment into a market opportunity. "I'm not turning this into marketing, Michael." A significant pause on the other end of the line. "Robert, you're a businessman. Everything you do is marketing, whether you want it to be or not. The question is whether you're going to control the narrative or let them control it for you." The conversation was interrupted by a female voice calling, "Isabella!" The girl jumped up and ran toward a woman in her mid-30s, thin, with deep dark circles under her eyes and a cleaning uniform still on. Lucia hugged her daughter tightly and then looked at Robert with a mixture of confusion and suspicion. "Who are you? What happened? Is Isabella okay?" Robert stood up, extending his hand respectfully. "My name is Robert Harrison Pierce. There was a situation today at the Christmas campaign my company is sponsoring. Your daughter was treated inappropriately by third-party employees, and I wanted to make sure she was okay before you arrived." Lucia shook his hand, but didn't let go of her daughter. Isabella, now more animated, began to recount everything that had happened, the words tumbling out. "Mum, I got in the picture with Santa Claus, and there was this really mean man who took me out, but then Robert showed up and said I could stay, and everyone took pictures with me, and he bought me food, and it was so cool, Mum." Lucia listened with an increasingly closed-off expression. When Isabella finished, she looked directly at Robert. "And what do you want in return?" The question was harsh, suspicious, protective. Robert recognized the same question Isabella had asked, only this time coming from someone who had learned the hard way that nothing in life is free, especially when it comes from rich people. "Nothing," Robert said, and then corrected himself. "No, that's a lie. I don't know what I want. I know I don't want your daughter to be exploited by the circus this is going to become. I know I want to help in some way, but I also know I've been trained my whole life to turn everything into a business, so I don't even trust myself right now." His brutal honesty seemed to disarm Lucia a little. She sighed deeply. "Look, Mr. Pierce, I appreciate what you did for my daughter today, but we've been through a lot. We've trusted people who promised to help and only wanted to show off. We get by on our own, without owing anyone any favors. So, with all due respect, we'll just keep doing our thing." Robert nodded, respecting her position. But before they left, he said one last thing. "I understand your distrust, but Isabella is going to be sought after in the coming days. The video of what happened is going viral. They'll want interviews, photos, they'll want to turn her story into a news item. If you need any protection, someone to shield you from this harassment, I have the resources for that." Lucia looked at her daughter, who didn't seem to fully grasp the scale of what the man was saying, and then back at him. "We'll see, you can leave your contact info with Isabella." Robert wrote his number on a napkin and handed it to the girl. "Anything, any time, you can call. And Isabella," he said, kneeling one last time, "you don't have to prove to anyone that you exist. You exist because you're here, because you feel, because you have dreams, and no stupid photographer can take that away from you." Isabella hugged him suddenly, a quick but intense hug, and whispered, "Thanks for seeing me." And as mother and daughter walked away down the mall corridor, disappearing into the crowd that continued its consumerist end-of-year dance, Robert stood there, feeling the weight of a responsibility he hadn't asked for, but now carried. Because that girl was right. He had become the very thing that had once hurt him, and now for the first time in a long time, he had a chance to choose to be different. The question was whether he had the courage for it, and whether the world around him would let him. The Monday after the mall incident, Robert's holding company office was in an uproar. The 15th floor conference room was packed. Marketing directors, lawyers, the entire public relations department, and at the center of it all, Gabriel Foster, the image consultant who had offered to turn the crisis into an opportunity. Gabriel was a man in his 40s with slicked back hair, an impeccable suit, and a smile that promised solutions to any problem as long as the check was big enough. "Robert," Gabriel began, opening a PowerPoint presentation on the room's large screen, "what happened at the mall was, without a doubt, a delicate moment. But delicacy is also opportunity. You humanized the brand, created an emotional connection, generated millions of views. Now we need to capitalize on that strategically." "Capitalize," Robert repeated, his voice low, but charged with something dangerous. "You want to capitalize on a child being humiliated and then helped?" Gabriel didn't lose his smile. "Not in those crude terms, of course, but think about it. We create a long-term corporate social responsibility initiative. We sponsor the girl's education, create a fund for vulnerable children, launch an ad campaign showing that your company genuinely cares about inclusion. Isabella becomes the brand's junior ambassador, appears at events, in commercials, all with supervision and within legal bounds, obviously. Her mother gets a full-time job at the holding company. We get them out of their precarious situation. Everybody wins. And what does Isabella win besides becoming a puppet for our advertising? Robert asked, and his tone made some of the directors shift uncomfortably in their chairs. Gabriel adjusted his tie, clearly not expecting resistance. She gets a better life, Robert. Education, healthcare, opportunities she would never have on her own. And yes, in return, she lends her image to a cause that will help other children too. It's a win-win. Michael, the director of operations, leaned forward. Robert, I understand your concern, but Gabriel has a point. The story has already gone viral. If we don't control the narrative, others will. There are already influencers wanting to interview the girl, TV networks offering money for exclusivity. If we don't come in with a serious proposal, she'll be devoured by people far worse than us. Robert looked around the table, seeing expensive executives who had spent their entire careers learning to turn emotion into profit, kindness into marketing, humanity into KPIs. And he had been one of them, had taught some of them, had built this empire on that very logic. But now, sitting in that refrigerated room with a view of Central Park, it all seemed sick. I'll think about it, he said finally. But no one contacts Isabella or her mother without going through me first. No one. Gabriel opened his mouth to argue, but Robert was already standing up, unilaterally ending the meeting. As he left the room, he heard the whispers, knew they were questioning if he was getting soft, if he was losing his business instincts, if he was letting emotion get in the way of business. In the elevator, alone, Robert leaned his head against the mirrored wall and closed his eyes. His phone vibrated. A message from Beatrice. We need to talk. It's about what happened at the mall. There are things you need to know about that Christmas that changed you. He ignored the message, but the discomfort lingered. Beatrice knew stories about him that no one else did. Secrets from a past he had rewritten so many times, he no longer knew which version was true. And now she was coming back, the way ghosts always do, when you least want them to. Meanwhile, in a 65-square-foot room in a tenement building in Bushwick, Lucia looked at the phone she had borrowed from a neighbor and read for the 10th time the messages that had started pouring in. Journalists wanting interviews, people offering money for exclusive photos, brands wanting to sponsor Isabella in exchange for event appearances. And in the midst of it all, a message that made her especially suspicious, from a woman introducing herself as a social worker from the mall, asking to make a home visit to ensure the child's well-being. Isabella, sitting on the bed she shared with her mother, was drawing in an old notebook, oblivious to the storm brewing around her. She had taped the photo from the Christmas campaign to the wall right next to the bed and looked at it every time she woke up, like someone looking at a protective charm. "Mom," she asked, without taking her eyes off her drawing, "why was that rich man so nice to me?" Lucia put down the phone and sat next to her daughter. "I don't know, sweetie. Sometimes people do good things for good reasons. Sometimes they do them for reasons we don't understand yet." "But do you think he was being real?" Isabella asked, and the question carried a weight beyond her years. Lucia hugged her daughter. "I think he was being real in that moment, but we can't trust that every moment will be like that. We can only trust each other, understand?" Isabella nodded but kept looking at the photo on the wall. There was something about it, in the way Robert had knelt down to her level, in the way he had looked at her as if she were important, that made her want to believe that adults could be trustworthy. But she had also learned far too early that hope could be dangerous. On Tuesday morning, Robert received a call from an unknown number. It was Lucia. "Mr. Pierce, sorry to call your personal cell, but a lot of people are trying to talk to us. There's a woman saying she's a social worker and needs to visit us because it was in the news that Isabella is a child at risk. I don't know what to do." Robert felt anger rise. "Don't answer anyone. Give me the social worker's information. I'll verify if she's legitimate or if it's just someone else trying to exploit the situation. And tell me something. Do you need anything urgently? Any overdue bills, any problem I can solve without turning this into a circus?" Lucia was silent for a moment, and Robert could almost feel her internal conflict, the struggle between pride and need. "We're behind on rent," she finally said, her voice low. 2 months. The landlord is threatening to kick us out by Christmas. "How much?" Robert asked, already opening his banking app. $520 a month, she replied, and Robert had to control his reaction because $1,040 was less than he spent on a business lunch, and for these two, it was the difference between having a roof over their heads and not. "I'll take care of it today," he said, "but on one condition. You let me hire a lawyer to protect you from the harassment that's coming. It's not to control you, it's to shield you from people with bad intentions." Lucia hesitated, then accepted with a tired sigh. "Okay, but I'm going to pay you back, you hear? It might be in small payments, but I'll pay you back." "I know you will," Robert said, and for the first time in years, he made a financial transaction without expecting a return on investment. While handling the rent situation, Robert received another call. Beatrice. He hesitated but answered, "What do you want?" Her voice came out soft, without the accusatory tone he expected. "I saw the video, Robert. I saw you with that little girl, and I recognized him. I recognized the boy you were before. You decided that feelings were a weakness." "I don't have time for this conversation, Beatrice." "You have to make time," she insisted, "because there's a woman trying to sell me a story about you and that Christmas that changed you. A woman named Veronica, the campaign coordinator. She's angry because you humiliated her in public, and she's trying to gather dirt to tarnish your image, to make it look like you only helped the girl for marketing. And she's found things, Robert. Old things." His blood ran cold. Veronica had access to the holding company's files, had worked at the company long enough to know stories, contracts, corporate secrets. If she was willing to use privileged information for revenge, the situation could get very ugly. "What does she know?" Robert asked, his voice tense. "She knows you're not exactly who you pretend to be, that the self-made man story you sell has a few holes, and she's willing to tell everyone if you don't find a way to rehabilitate her image." Robert hung up and immediately called the legal department. But before he could give instructions, his phone rang again. It was a number he recognized as Lucia's, but it was Isabella on the line, her voice frantic. "Robert, there are a bunch of people at our door. There are cameras, people shouting my mum's name. My mum is crying and I'm scared." Robert felt his chest tighten. "Isabella, listen. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone. I'm on my way right now. Hang in there. I'll handle this." He grabbed his car keys and ran out of the office, ignoring Michael, who tried to stop him in the hallway. In the chaotic New York traffic, Robert cursed every red light, every bus blocking the lane, every minute that passed knowing Isabella was scared. When he arrived at the tenement building, the scene was the exact chaos he had imagined. 3 news vans, photographers, reporters with microphones, onlookers filming with their phones. He pushed his way through with an authority that made the crowd part, ran up the narrow stairs to the 2nd floor, and knocked on the door. "Lucia, Isabella, it's me, Robert." The door opened a crack, and when he entered, he saw Lucia with red eyes and Isabella huddled in a corner clutching a pillow. Robert knelt in front of the girl. "Look at me. You're safe. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you." Isabella looked at him with those huge, fear-filled eyes. "Why do they want to talk to us so bad? We didn't do anything wrong." "Because you touched a lot of people's hearts," he explained carefully. "But some people want to turn you into a news story, a headline, a click, and I'm not going to let them." Robert took out his phone and made a call. "Michael, I need private security now. The address is 412 Wilson Avenue, Bushwick, and I need an apartment, furnished, leased in the holding company's name, in a building with a 24-hour doorman, for today." On the other end, Michael tried to argue about procedures, about approvals, but Robert cut him off. "I'm not asking, I'm telling you. Make it happen." Lucia, who had heard everything, approached. "Mr. Pierce, we can't accept an apartment from you. This is already becoming too much of a dependency." "It's not from me," Robert said, looking directly at her. "It's from the company, and it's not a gift, it's protection. You saw what's happening out there. You can't live in peace in this place. In the new apartment, you'll have a doorman, security, privacy. And when this craziness dies down, if you want to come back here, you can, but for now, at least, let me make sure you're safe." Isabella tugged on her mother's hand. "Mum, Please, I'm so scared of all those people downstairs." And it was that, the fear in her daughter's voice, that broke Lucia's last resistance. She nodded, the tears finally flowing freely. That same afternoon, with the help of private security guards Michael sent over, Robert managed to get Lucia and Isabella out of the tenement building without the press getting any useful footage. The temporary apartment was in a discreet building in Astoria, a simple but clean two-bedroom with basic furniture and a small balcony overlooking the city. When Isabella saw that she would have her own bed, she looked at her mother with a sparkle in her eyes that was worth more than any multi-million-dollar deal Robert had ever closed. The girl ran and threw herself on the bed, laughing for the first time in days, and Lucia finally allowed a smile to appear on her tired face. Robert was leaving, giving the two of them privacy to settle in, when Isabella ran and hugged his legs. Thank you for seeing me, thank you for not forgetting." He crouched down and looked at her. "I'll never forget, Isabella, but I need you to understand something. The world out there will want to use you. They'll want to turn your story into a product, and some people will do it pretending it's to help you. You need to promise me that if anyone offers you anything, any proposal, you'll tell me first. Can you do that?" Isabella nodded seriously. "I can, but you have to promise me something too." "What?" Robert asked. "That you won't use me either. That if I become a bother to you, if I'm not useful for what you need anymore, you'll tell me the truth, not just disappear." Her raw honesty cut deep. Robert held her small hand in his. "I promise, and if I break that promise, you have every right to hate me." Isabella studied his face for a long moment. "I won't hate you, but I'll be very sad, and I think you will be too." When Robert left the building, he found Beatrice leaning against his car. She was thinner, her hair shorter, but she still had that way of looking that saw through the masks he wore. "You really care about her," Beatrice said. "It wasn't a question. It's not an act. You're really feeling this." Robert unlocked the car, too tired for old fights. "And that surprises you?" "It moves me," she corrected, "because I spent 8 years trying to get you to feel something genuine for another human being, and a 9-year-old girl managed it in a day." "What do you want, Beatrice?" She sighed. "To help you, because Veronica isn't alone in her revenge. She's joined forces with the photographer, the one you humiliated. They're building a narrative that you're only helping the girl to clean up the company's image after years of exploiting contract workers. And they have proof, Robert. Contracts, old complaints that were swept under the rug, everything." Robert leaned against the car, feeling the weight of past decisions coming back to haunt him. "And you? Why are you telling me this?" "Because regardless of what happened between us, I saw you try to be a better person today. I saw you put a child's well-being above your empire. And that deserves to be protected, not destroyed by bitter people." They stood there in silence for a moment, and then Robert asked something he needed to know. "That Christmas you mentioned, what did you find out?" Beatrice looked at him with an old sadness. "That you weren't just humiliated that night. You were taught by people who should have protected you that feelings were dangerous traps, and you took that so seriously that you built your entire life on that lie." Robert got into the car without replying, but her words echoed all the way back to the office. And when he got there, he found Gabriel Foster waiting with a new proposal, more aggressive, more invasive, promising to turn Isabella into a national symbol of resilience if Robert would just sign the right contracts. And for the first time in his life, Robert Harrison Pierce said no to money, no to opportunity, no to growth. He said no because he had promised a little girl he wouldn't use her, and promises, he was learning, were more valuable than contracts. But the price of keeping that promise was only just beginning to reveal itself. Because Veronica and the photographer weren't bluffing, the evidence was being organized, journalists were being fed compromising information, and a storm was brewing that would test whether Robert had truly changed, or if that moment in the mall had been just another sophisticated mask. And Isabella, sleeping for the first time in her own bed, dreamed of Christmas photos and adults who kept their promises, not yet knowing that sometimes the most beautiful stories are the ones that cost the most to become real. If you were in Robert's shoes, Would you help Isabella even knowing it could destroy everything you've built? Or would you protect your empire and walk away from the girl before it was too late? Tell us in the comments. The bombshell dropped on a Thursday morning, exactly 1 week before Christmas. A news site published an extensive report with the headline, "The Price of Redemption: How the Millionaire Turned Hero Built His Empire on the Backs of Those He Claimed to Protect." The article was co-authored by 3 journalists and included documents, old contracts, and testimonies from former contract workers who had worked on campaigns for Robert's holding company. There were accounts of grueling hours, delayed payments, abusive quotas, and employees being humiliated by coordinators who dished out the exact kind of treatment Isabella had suffered, only they did it every day away from the cameras. The report suggested that Robert's gesture at the mall had been calculated, a marketing ploy to divert attention from questionable labor practices. Veronica was featured as a source, as was the photographer, both portrayed as victims of a cruel system run by a man who feigned kindness when it was convenient. Robert read the article in his office with Michael by his side, both in a deathly silence. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. The legal department wanted to sue for defamation. The marketing department wanted to issue a press release. The board of directors had called an emergency meeting, and Gabriel Foster, the image consultant, was literally at his office door, saying that now more than ever it was essential to make Isabella the brand's official ambassador to prove that the social commitment was real and lasting. Michael was the first to speak. "This is bad, Robert. Really bad. There are things in there that are true, you know that. We always knew some of the contractors pushed their employees past the limit. We turned a blind eye because they delivered results, and now it's come back to bite us." Robert didn't take his eyes off the computer screen. How many employees were treated like Isabella was while we looked the other way? Michael hesitated. "I don't have that number, but probably a lot." The answer was honest and painful. Robert closed his laptop and looked out the window, watching New York City pulse below, indifferent to the personal crises of those looking down from above. "So we really did become what once hurt us? We built an empire on the same humiliation I suffered," Michael sighed. "What do you want to do?" Robert stood up, grabbing his coat. "I'm going to talk to Isabella. She deserves to know the truth before she reads it in the news." "Are you crazy?" Michael nearly shouted. "You're going to tell a child that you're the exact type of businessman who allows people like her to be exploited? That will destroy your relationship." Robert looked at his friend with a frightening calm. "Then let it be destroyed. But at least it will be with honesty. I promised her I wouldn't lie, and I intend to keep that promise." When he arrived at the apartment, in Astoria, Robert found Lucia reading the report on the borrowed phone, her face pale. Isabella was on the balcony, drawing, still shielded from the storm by her own innocence. "You saw," Lucia said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was different, harder, more disappointed than angry. Robert nodded. "That's why I came. I need to talk to both of you, honestly." Lucia called Isabella, who came in from the balcony holding her sketchbook. The 3 of them sat at the small kitchen table, and Robert started from the beginning, without embellishments, without cheap excuses. The report that came, how today has a lot of truth in it. I built my company by hiring other companies to do the dirty work. Those companies, in turn, treated their employees the same way you were treated, Isabella. And I knew. Not the details, not the names and faces, but I knew the system I maintained allowed bad things to happen, and I didn't change it because it was more profitable the way it was. Isabella listened intently, her big eyes trying to process information far too heavy for her age. "So you let people be mean because it made money?" she asked, and the simplicity of the question was devastating. "Yes," Robert confirmed. "I did. I wasn't the one doing the humiliating, but I was the one who allowed the humiliation to happen. And when I saw you in that mall being treated that way, it was like I finally saw what I had become." Lucia squeezed her daughter's hand, protective. "And what do you expect us to do with this information? Forgive you and keep accepting your help? Become the poster children for your change of heart?" Robert shook his head. "No, I expect you to decide if you still want my help or if you'd rather I stay away. And whatever you decide, I'll respect it. But I need you to know, Isabella, that if you decide you don't want to see me anymore, I'll understand. You have every right not to trust me." Isabella was silent for a long moment, looking at her own hands, then at her mother, then back at Robert. "You said you wouldn't use me. You said you'd be truthful. And now you're here telling me bad things about yourself, even though you know I might not like you anymore because of it. That doesn't seem like using me. That seems like what you promised, the truth." Her answer touched something deep in Robert, but Lucia wasn't convinced. "Isabella, honey, you're a child. You don't have to decide this alone. And you, Mr. Pierce, even by telling the truth now, it doesn't change the fact that you profited for years from the suffering of people like me. I've worked for those contracting companies. I've been treated like garbage by people who make 10 times what I do. And finding out you were the boss of it all makes me question everything." Robert nodded. "You're right. And I can't change the past, but I can change the present. I can start by auditing every contract in the holding company, reviewing working conditions, breaking contracts with companies that don't respect their employees, creating real channels for reporting abuse, not because it's good for marketing, but because it's the bare minimum a decent human being should do." "And Isabella?" Lucia pressed. "How will you guarantee she won't become the trophy of your redemption?" "I can't guarantee it," Robert admitted, "because I'm still learning how to be different. But I can promise that every decision I make involving her, you will know about it first. You will have veto power. You will have a voice, and if at any point you feel I'm using her, you kick me out of your lives and I'll accept it." Isabella, who had been quietly absorbing the conversation, finally asked, "Can you promise me one more thing?" "What?" Robert asked. "That you'll do the same thing you did for me for other people. That you'll see them the same way you saw me. Because if you only changed because of me, then I'm too special and other people aren't, and that's not, and, right?" Her wisdom, born from a place of genuine pain but also genuine hope, broke down Robert's last defenses. He felt tears begin to form, something that hadn't happened in years. "I promise, Isabella. I'll try to see everyone. I don't know if I'll always succeed, but I'll try every day." Lucia looked at her daughter, then at Robert, and then made the most difficult decision. "We're not going to kick you out of our lives, but we're not going to be your alibi either. If you're going to change, change for real. And we'll be here watching, not as an advertisement, but as witnesses. And if you go back to being who you were, we'll leave and you'll have no right to complain." Robert accepted the terms, and then something none of them expected happened. Isabella stood up, went to him, and took his hand. "Come with me, I want to show you something." She led him to her room, pointed to the wall where she had taped the photo from the Christmas campaign. "I look at this picture every day, but it's not just because of the photo. It's because that day, for the first time, someone really saw me. Not as a problem, not as a poor little thing, but as a person who deserved to be there. And I think you were seen that day too. You were seen for who you really are, underneath all that serious businessman stuff." Robert looked at the photo, saw himself kneeling beside her, saw the expression on his own face that he didn't recognize. Vulnerability, humanity, a real connection. "Why do you believe in me so much, Isabella? You barely know me." "Because I saw your eyes when you helped me," she answered simply, "and they were just like mine when I was taken out of the photo. You know how it hurts, and people who know how it hurts don't do it to others on purpose, unless they've forgotten. I think you had forgotten, but now you're remembering again." That afternoon, Robert returned to his office with a clarity he hadn't had in years. He gathered all the directors, all the lawyers, the entire board, and he announced a series of measures that shocked everyone: a complete external audit of all contractors, with mandatory publication of the results; the creation of an anonymous reporting channel managed by an external entity; a review of all contracts with clauses guaranteeing decent working conditions; and, most radical of all, the transformation of part of the holding company into a cooperative where employees would have a voice in decisions. Gabriel Foster tried to argue that it was commercial suicide, that the shareholders would revolt, that the competition would take advantage. Michael, surprisingly, sided with Robert. Maybe it's time we made less profit and slept better. The decision leaked to the press before the meeting even ended. Some news outlets celebrated it as a corporate revolution, others criticized it as a sophisticated marketing maneuver. Veronica and the photographer gave more interviews, insisting it was all a facade. But something had changed in the tone of the public conversation. People began to wonder if it was possible for someone to truly change, or if we are all condemned to be the worst versions of ourselves forever. Beatrice called that night. "Are you really going to do this? Risk everything?" Robert, exhausted but strangely at peace, replied, "I'm going to try. I don't know if it will work, but I promised a 9-year-old girl I would try to see people, and she deserves for me to keep that promise more than I deserve to keep my empire intact." In the week leading up to Christmas, strange things began to happen. Employees of contracting companies started reporting abuses through the channel Robert had created. Some reports were serious enough to break contracts immediately, which caused operational chaos, but also showed that the channel was real, not just for show. Other companies in the same sector came under pressure to follow suit. Some caved, others resisted. Isabella went back to school, with Lucia now able to work more humane hours at a full-time job with one of the holding company's firms, not a charity position, but doing what she did best, cleaning and organizing, but with a formal contract, benefits, and respect. On December 23rd, the day before Christmas Eve, Robert received a notice from the board of directors. A faction of shareholders wanted to force him out. They said he had become too emotional, that he was making decisions based on sentimentality and not data. The vote would be in January, but the message was clear. Change had a price, and that price could include losing everything he had built. Robert went to the apartment in Astoria that night and found Lucia and Isabella decorating a small Christmas tree they had bought with her mother's first paycheck. He told them about the threat of losing the company, about the possibility of everything falling apart. Isabella stopped hanging ornaments and looked at him. "And if you lose everything, are you going to stop being nice to people?" The question was simple but carried the weight of a final test. Robert thought for a moment and then answered honestly, "I don't know, Isabella. I was programmed my whole life to think I only had value if I was powerful and rich. Without that, I don't know who I am." "Then maybe it's time to find out," she said, going back to hanging ornaments on the tree. "Because I know you without you being a boss of anything, and you're already somebody." Lucia, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. "You know what's hardest for people like us who came from nothing, Mr. Pierce? It's not the lack of money. It's the lack of people who look at us like we're people. You did that for my daughter. For the first time in her life, someone powerful treated her like she mattered. If you lose your company but continue to be this man, you haven't lost anything that truly matters." Robert sat there, in the small living room of that simple apartment, helping a 9-year-old girl decorate a 5-foot Christmas tree, and realized that this might be the most important moment of his life. Not the multi-million-dollar mergers, not the business awards, not the dinners at expensive restaurants. But this moment, right here, small, quiet, real. On Christmas morning, something unexpected happened. Contract workers, those who had spent years being invisible, began sharing their own stories on social media, inspired by Isabella's case. They told of humiliations they had suffered, of being treated like disposable objects, of having to choose between dignity and a paycheck. And they also told of small acts of kindness they had received along the way, of people who had seen them when no one else did. The movement gained an unplanned name, See Me Too, and it became a wave that forced entire companies to review their practices, not because they wanted to, but because it was finally becoming too expensive, in terms of public image, to continue being cruel. Robert didn't know if he would survive the January vote. He didn't know if he would keep his empire or have to rebuild from scratch, but he knew one thing. He had been seen. Isabella had seen him, had seen the boy beneath the businessman, had seen the humanity he had buried under layers of ambition and fear. And in return, he had learned to see employees not as numbers on a spreadsheet, but as people with stories, families, dreams. To see that power without empathy is just sophisticated tyranny. To see that wealth without humanity is just empty accumulation. Late on Christmas afternoon, Robert, Lucia, and Isabella were sitting on the small apartment balcony, watching the city light up as evening fell. Isabella was holding the campaign photo, the one that had started it all, and pointed to her own face in the image. "You know what's funny? In this picture, I'm smiling because someone finally let me stay. But now, I smile because I learned that I don't need permission to exist. I already exist. I always have, with or without a picture." Robert looked at her, at this child who had been his teacher without knowing it, and said, "Thank you, Isabella, for teaching me how to exist again, too." She tilted her head, curious. "Had you stopped existing?" "I had," he admitted. "I had become just a function, businessman, boss, millionaire, but a person, a human being who feels and cares and cries and laughs for real. I had forgotten how to be that." Isabella thought for a moment and then offered, "Want to get in a picture with me again? Not for a campaign, not for the news, just a picture of us to prove that we exist, both of us just as we are." Lucia took her phone, still the one borrowed from the neighbor but soon to be replaced by her own, and captured the moment. Robert and Isabella on the balcony, New York City in the background, two survivors of different humiliations learning together that to exist with dignity is the greatest luxury anyone can have. The photo didn't go viral. It didn't get millions of views. It didn't win any awards. But it was printed and placed on the wall of Isabella's room, right next to the other one, and every time she looked at the two images she understood something profound. The first photo proved she'd managed to get into a place they tried to keep her out of. The second proved she no longer needed to get into any place because she was already exactly where she was supposed to be, existing, being seen, mattering. Robert didn't know what the future held. He didn't know if he would be ousted from the holding company, didn't know if the changes he implemented would survive the pressure from shareholders, didn't know if he could always be the better version of himself that Isabella had awakened. But he knew for the first time in decades that he was truly alive. Not just functioning, not just performing, but feeling, caring, being human. And if that cost him his entire empire, maybe it was worth it. Because empires crumble, campaigns end, money evaporates. But that girl, that moment, that lesson, that seeing and being seen is what makes us human, that was something no financial crisis could ever take away. And in the end, when it all comes down to it, when we strip away the layers of success and failure, of wealth and poverty, of power and vulnerability, what's left is very simple. Someone saw someone. And in that act of seeing, both were transformed. Isabella, once invisible, learned that existing doesn't require permission. Robert, once shielded, learned that feeling isn't a weakness. And all of us, witnesses to this story, can perhaps learn that the greatest gift we can give someone is not a place in the photo, but the recognition that they deserve to be there all along. Because in the end, we don't need Christmas campaigns to be kind. We don't need cameras to do the right thing. We just need to remember to see the people around us, to see their pain, their dreams, their humanity. And when we truly see, we change. And by changing, we make the world a place where more children like Isabella can exist without asking permission, where more adults like Robert can feel without fear, where all of us can simply be human, with all the flaws and all the beauty that entails. And maybe, just maybe, that's the true meaning of Christmas that the campaign tried to sell but ended up discovering. It's not about fake snow and perfect sets. It's about seeing and being seen, about reaching out a hand and allowing yourself to be touched, about tearing down masks and building connections. It's about remembering that all of us, absolutely all of us, deserve to be in the picture. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Isabella and Robert has touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of transformation, of a girl who just wanted to be seen and a man who needed to relearn how to see, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what part of this story resonated with you the most. Have you ever been in a similar situation, where you felt invisible or where you learned to truly see someone? Every day we bring you intense stories like this one, stories that reveal the deepest side of the human soul, stories about real people facing dilemmas we all recognize. We'll see you in the next episode, where a new journey will touch your heart and make you reflect on what really matters in life. Until then, remember, you exist, you matter, and you deserve to be seen.